Way past time. Oh, well, cool. Hot mic, good. Well, good morning. Good morning. I appreciate y'all being here this cool morning, not cold, but cool. And for the Small Business Development Committee, we've got a full agenda today. And before we start off, I'd like to ask Representative Matt Barton to lead us in an invocation.
Bow your head. Heavenly Father, thank you for everything. Please be with us at the beginning of this session that we make great decisions for the state of Georgia and for you. Thank you again. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Representative Barton. I appreciate you doing that. This is the first of many meetings for the Small Business Development Committee this session. And first on the agenda is Chairman Don Parsons with HR 579. Chairman Parsons, would you like to present to the committee? Wherever you're comfortable with, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and members of the committee. I have this resolution. It's let me get it in my pocket here. It's pretty straightforward. One of those things that pretty much is a pretty plain on the face of it resolution. What this would do would be to establish a Sustainability and Economic Opportunity Commission for the state of Georgia. Sustainability has become a kind of a buzzword over the last 10, 12 years, something like that. I hear it a lot. Started hearing a lot when I went to high schools several years ago. And now those kids have gone up, they graduated from college and they're out in business, becoming business leaders. But this is to have this commission created that would study sustainability. It would be made up of like a commission made up of some members of the Georgia Assembly and then some people from the industry itself. And they would help these come up with ideas and solutions on how to get certifications for businesses to be certified in this. And of course, this whole sustainability issue is something that businesses, many of them, when they want to come to Georgia or establish in Georgia nationally, internationally, and worldwide, sustainability is something that's very important to them. And that's pretty much what it is. It establishes, it goes along the language that is normally created for a commission. And as far as the makeup of it and the life of it, when it would be abolished, so on and so forth. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions if you have them.
All right, well, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, are there any questions? What about the folks online? Cool. Oh, that was good. Very good. All right. What is the pleasure of the committee? We got a motion to approve. Is there a second? And a second? Very good. All right. Any further discussion? Motion and second.
We have one question.
We have one question.
Chairman Meeks, or Floor Leader Meeks.
Okay, Floor Leader Meeks. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Parsons. In terms of the bigger picture of establishing the commission to help these organizations or businesses become certified, I'm assuming we're talking about a lot of the certifications that are being used by some of our trading partners. Have we talked to any of the organizations that may be out there doing some of that? I know that National Cotton Council has a U.S. Trust protocol that they're working on. We personally work with a group that certifies our operation when it comes to the production of some commodities. Have we reached out to them yet to see what that looks like in their world while we're trying to bring it to other industries?
Yeah, Chairman Meeks, I believe that they've been involved in the creation of this resolution. They've been involved in this all along. It's my understanding anyway. Yes.
Cool. All right, we have another question from Representative Schofield.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I just like to know if there's any language in there that includes a racial impact and minority inclusion in this commission.
Thank you for the question. There's nothing specifically regarding that. It would be open. The appointments are made by the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and the governor has an appointee also. And they would use their best judgment in this. There's nothing specifically regarding any particular minorities or anything like that.
All right.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, well, good. Well, we've had good conversation. Had a motion to do pass and a second. All right, let's call the vote. All those in favor of HR 579 receiving the do pass designation from this committee, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. All right, well, there was only one opposed. It passed. Congratulations, Mr. Chairman. It moves forward.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
sir. Thank you for
members of the
bringing
committee.
that to our attention. Cool. All right. Well, now we have a great presentation by the president of Deluxe Corporation, CEO Barry McCarthy, has written a book, and it'll be on the members' desk when we get to session today. So, Mr. McCarthy, you've got the floor. Thank you for being here.
Well, good morning, and well, thank you for the invitation to talk about the importance of small business in our state and in our country. Let me start by telling you a little bit about our company. It's Deluxe. You probably know Deluxe historically as a check printer. You've probably had checks printed across your lifetime from our company, and we appreciate that business. But that's less than a third of our company's revenue today. We are a payments processing company, and we process roughly $3 trillion a year of payments. That's roughly 15% of the US economy are processed by this company you probably don't know very much about. We made a very major commitment to the state of Georgia last year, committing to bring more than 700 high-paying jobs in the payments and fintech space. And we have recently opened our technology and customer experience center in Sandy Springs, and we're in the process of hiring people to grow the business there. The other thing you probably don't know about our company is that we have an unusual perspective on small business in America. We service and provide support to more than 4 million small businesses across the country. We help 400,000 new small businesses get started every year. And as a result, we have a particularly good vantage point of what's happening with small businesses. We've done two things to help give back to the small business community. The first is we have created the Emmy-nominated #1 lifestyle program on Hulu. Who would think that a check printer and a payments company would do that? But we produce the #1 lifestyle program on Hulu and Prime Video called The Small Business Revolution. You can see it on Hulu, you can see it on Prime, you can see it on YouTube, or of course at our website, deluxe.com. And in that program, we choose a small town or a community within a bigger town and help 8 small businesses sort of improve themselves, almost like you see in real estate shows where there are real estate makeovers. These are almost like business makeovers, helping small businesses succeed. We just released our sixth edition of the series, and I would encourage you to view it if you're interested in small business. We've also taken some of those lessons and turned it into a book that I authored that you're going to get today through the chairman's office. And it's by the same name, Small Business Revolution. And it tells the story of dozens of small businesses. It's really a how-to guide in a very approachable way, talking about how to be a small business owner, how to be successful, how to think about finances, how to do social media, how to do regular mass market media, how to test a product to make sure you've got the right product, being clear on your purpose and mission. And we've been very pleased with its success. It actually debuted at #2 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list in October. So you put that together with the #1 lifestyle program on Hulu and Prime and a #2 best-selling book. And what we think that says is that small businesses in America are hungry for insight and help. Our company's mission overall is that we're champions for business so communities thrive. We fundamentally believe that small businesses are the backbone of our culture, of our country, of our economy. They're the #1 creators of jobs. They are the source of much of the innovation across our nation. And we believe in this, the self-fulfilling cycle that is started by small business, that if a small business is successful, they hire somebody. That person wants to take their family to pizza on Friday night, so that creates a job at the pizzeria. Then they need to get a car cleaned, or they need to get tires changed on their car. And that creates other jobs that beget other jobs, and it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. So then there are resources to do all the things we all care about: having great schools, great parks, great healthcare, doing the right thing across our communities. But none of that is possible if small businesses don't succeed. And in the book, I write pretty extensively that I consider small business owners in America true American heroes. No, they're not the ones fighting the war to protect our freedom, but they're the ones every day fighting to ensure that our economy survives, that people have jobs, and that our communities are successful. A couple of things that I just would like to compliment the committee and the state of Georgia about. We made a decision to put 700 plus jobs here, high paying jobs. And we did a national search about where we should locate those jobs. Our company has been headquartered in Minneapolis, St. Paul for 106 years. And we made a very big decision to put the jobs and put the future of those jobs and our payments business here in Atlanta. And we're very excited about it and very proud of that. That doesn't mean we love Minnesota any less, but it means that we recognize the great things that the state of Georgia has to offer companies like ours. I'd like to highlight a couple of them for you. First of all, the state of Georgia is the fintech capital probably of the world. And you don't think about that very often. You probably hear lots about the movie industry. Maybe you hear about, the 4 Ps of Pines, Pulp, and more. Payments should be one of those, because in this state, in the 400 corridor from downtown northward, as well as south of the airport, roughly 80% of the world's payments get processed by a company that's based here or has a major operation here. And we want to be part of that ecosystem. But that's not just the only part. The state, the legislature, the university system of Georgia has leaned forward and done something incredible in creating what's called the FinTech Academy, where the Georgia system is now producing candidates, not just with a degree in whatever their topic is, but to support and understand our industry, so that we're building a pool of FinTech-ready talent. And of course, I have to comment on the environment that you all have created in the state of Georgia. It's no mistake that it's the #1 state for business over and over and over again. A piece of that is obviously tax policy, which we note and was part of our decision. But it's more than that. It is a reasonable regulatory environment. And it's also at a place where we have access to folks like you. It's a very opening and welcoming state, and we're very proud to be doing more business here and to be part of this ecosystem. So I would just close by telling you that our company is committed to small business. We serve more than 4 million small businesses today, add more than 400,000 new to our portfolio every year. They are the absolute backbone of America. They are true American heroes. And we are glad now to be part of the Georgia ecosystem. I appreciate the time.
Super. Mr. McCarthy, thank you very much for that. We appreciate your presentation and also appreciate your book. As I said, and as you commented on, it'll be on everyone's desk today. I couldn't agree with you more about the role that small business play. Obviously, I'm biased, but one of the goals that we've set is, with Georgia being the #1 state to do business, the governor and myself and several others in the legislature want it to be the #1 state for small business as well. We see that small business can create the innovation. It's agile enough to adjust. It's quick to move forward, and that spirit of individualism and willing to take a chance is alive and well in Georgia, and our goal is to fertilize it and make it grow. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, and the books are going out. Thank you.
Terrific. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Super. All right. Next on the agenda, as committee members know, we're looking at electric charging. And that's something that we've been doing since the last session. And so now we've got Derek Colbert, Senior Vice President with External Affairs, will Pull Apart Parts. He's going to talk to us about recycling parts for electric vehicles. And it's something that we need to look at with the everything that's going on in that sector right now. So Mr. Corbett, we appreciate you being here. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Representative Chokas, thank you for having me, and thank you for spending some time talking about battery recycling. You put it exactly right. It's an industry that's in its infancy now, but I think it's about to get a healthy dose of steroids, and we're going to see that industry start to boom. So it's important to have these conversations and start thinking about how we're going to deal with that increased infrastructure that's coming. First, let me talk a little bit about Pull Apart so that folks know our role in the battery recycling industry. Pull Apart is among the nation's leading auto recyclers. We have facility, we're headquartered here in Atlanta. We've got 4 yards in Georgia, and we've got yards between here and Arizona. We are the front end of the auto recycling industry. So our model, we buy hundreds of thousands of end-of-life vehicles a year. We bring those vehicles in. We put them out on our retail yards. Folks come in and buy the parts that they need off of those vehicles. And then whatever's left, we bring into our processing facility. We rip it apart. We spread everything out, and we send those recyclable, recoverable materials to our recycling plants to get ground into feedstock to make new products. So we are really proud of our role, for starters, in reducing that footprint that humanity's leaving behind. Just to put it in perspective, and this number is important as we go on in this conversation, about 30 million cars a year on average are removed from the stream. And these are end-of-life vehicles that are wrecked or just too worn out to repair. And so absent the auto recyclers, these cars go to the rubbish heap. And I don't know what 90 million cars looks like stacked up, but I can promise you it's a pretty tall pile. So what we're doing is extremely important. When it comes to battery recycling, that is a fairly new part of the recycling industry. And it's one that people much smarter than me are trying to crack. Our role in the industry is the front end of the industry. We're the harvesters of these batteries. And so we're the very beginning of that recycling chain. I told you 30 million cars a year are pulled out of the stream. Small percentage of those today are hybrid or electric vehicles. For instance, Pull Apart in Georgia alone, we bought well over 20,000 cars last year. These are end-of-life vehicles headed for the rubbish heap. We pull them out. Less than 2% of those were hybrids or electric vehicles. So it shows you that today it's a very small percentage. But if you look at the numbers over the last several years, 2.4% of all vehicles produced and put into the flow in 2019 were hybrids. 3% in 2020 were hybrids, jumps all the way up to 5% in 2021 that were hybrids. And then an additional 3% of those were electric vehicles. So the graph is in an upward trajectory. So that's what Pull Apart does. We buy end-of-life vehicles, we reuse what is reusable, and we recycle the rest. So the business of battery recycling is something that everybody's trying to figure out, but it's not an easy nut to crack. And so I'm going to lay out for y'all our role, our experience. We buy a car, we buy a hybrid vehicle. The first thing we got to do is get that battery out. It's an extremely dangerous piece of equipment. When we have our training manual set out for a hybrid vehicle, we use tools like crowbars. We use tools like 1,000-volt gloves. You got to have a buddy there so that if you accidentally get electrocuted, he can pull you off the electric current. So there's a lot of danger when it comes to separating the battery from the vehicle. Once we're able to get that battery out of the vehicle, the first thing we have to do is pull a kill switch. And the kill switch shuts down all of the juice. Then you cut the plugs off and you wrap those plugs in an electrical tape so that there's no exposed wiring. Then you got to get those batteries stacked up on a pallet in a very specific way so that you don't leach any material into the environment, so that you've removed all of the safety hazards and that they are safe to ship. That's your hybrids. Then you got your lithium-ion batteries. And so when I talk about lithium-ion batteries, I'm talking about electric vehicles. These are purely EVs that come in with a lithium-ion battery. Very similar. Let me go back a half a step. So when we discuss our hybrid cars, we're talking about nickel metal hydride batteries. These batteries weigh between 160 and 200 pounds usually, so they're very heavy, but they're nickel metal hydride batteries. Your lithium-ion batteries power your electric vehicles. The main feedstock in these is cobalt, which is a very hard to find special precious metal. But get your electric vehicle in. First thing you got to do is try to discharge the vehicle. That is a challenge because oftentimes when you have drained all of the charge out of your lithium-ion battery and you come back to work the next day, it's got a 35% charge. So these things are tricky. They're very unique, and they've got some nuances that we're all still trying to figure out. But once you get it discharged, then you got to get it out of the car. And each battery roughly 6 feet long and weighs about 1,000 pounds. So when you remove the battery from an electric vehicle, you don't necessarily take the battery out. I think all of you have probably changed one of your 12-volt batteries in the car. With a lithium-ion battery, you cut all of the attachments, you pull the kill switch, and then you lift the car off the battery. So you lift the car, go set the car down, and you've got a 1,000-pound, 6-foot-long battery that is also in the wrong kind of scenario a bomb. So they're very dangerous. They're very heavy. It takes a lot of manpower just to maneuver them. And then once you get them moved, there's a lot of work that you have to do on the storage end to make sure they're safe. You got to keep the charge out of them. You've got to wrap them in a very special manner because they are hazardous materials. And so you have an environmental responsibility to protect the environment from the potential hazards that can come from the lithium-ion batteries. This is what the particular challenge is when it comes to the recycling barriers that we're running into when we talk about battery recycling. Nickel metal hydride battery is a little different. You can wrap those up tight, stick them on a pallet, ship them to a recycler. One of the problems you run into is there's very few battery recyclers around the country. I told you before that it's in its infancy. It's growing. In fact, most of you've probably read the article that Atlanta, Covington is going to be host to one of our newest battery recyclers in the country. But outside of that, there's only 5 that I know of, none on the East Coast. I know that Eric Frederickson with Calder Recycles here, and he's gonna go into more detail. So I don't want to steal his talking points because he'll be running low. But there's very few opportunities to send these off to be shipped, and the cost to ship is quite expensive. If you want to send a nickel metal hydride battery for shipment, the average cost is $160 just to ship it. So that is a challenge in itself. When you talk about lithium-ion batteries, it gets even harder because you can't just stick that in the back of the FedEx truck. These are hazardous materials that have to be shipped with hazmat labeling, hazmat wrapping, hazmat care, and it costs a considerable amount more by virtue of the fact that it's much bigger, by about 800 pounds, and that it is a hazardous material, which adds a whole new set of complications. So today, the cost really exceeds the value of battery recycling. But we talked a little earlier about numbers that are on the rise, and markets are going to do what markets are going to do. So we believe that that's not going to be the case, that as we continue to transition a fleet of passenger vehicles to hybrid and electric vehicle, that demand for these precious metals is going to go up, and that by virtue of having to make a whole lot more, you're going to need a whole lot more stock. So we see this market as one that is going to grow and grow very fast. Today, when it comes to battery recycling, the most value in recycling your battery, and this is important because this will always be a part of the recycling economy, is reuse. So when we get a nickel metal hydride battery, we sell it to a used auto parts dealer. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I would be happy to talk more in detail privately about who it is we sell these batteries to. But what they do is they pull the cores out and they refurbish the cores of these batteries, and they sell these cores to mechanics. And so where you would take your old 1985 Chevy Silverado in to have the rods bored, you'll take your hybrid car in because it's not holding its charge long enough, and the mechanic is going to replace your cores in your battery. So these nickel metal hydride batteries, the best market for them today for us in our region, far away from the battery recyclers, is to sell them as auto parts, and they're used to keep cars on the road and extend the longevity of these hybrid vehicles. Lithium-ion batteries, very similarly, the highest value for them, for us, is to sell them to a used auto parts retailer who sells them to mechanics who sells them as replacement batteries. You can't refurbish a lithium-ion battery, at least not today. So they can only be sold as a replacement part. So whereas you take your 1985 Chevy Silverado for an engine replacement, you're going to take your 2015 Nissan Leaf in for an engine replacement, but the engine is a lithium-ion battery. There's a lot more that you can talk about when it comes to this industry. It is nuanced, it's exciting, it's growing, but most importantly, it's really important if we continue on the trajectory we're on. Recyclers have to be a part of the conversation, because without recyclers, you will not have the feedstock you need to meet the demand for production. So I work for Pull Apart, but I'm a board member for the Georgia Recycling Association, and it's something that we care about deeply for our industry members, but also for our environmental stewardship purposes. So that's my stick. Go Dogs.
That got you some points. Derek, thank you very much for being here. One of the questions that I have
Yes.
Is you were talking about the nickel and the lithium batteries. What type of life under normal wear and tear do you get out of them?
Well, most of the ones that we buy still have a lot of life.
Oh, really?
In general, they outlast the nuts and bolts that are in the vehicle. But the right answer for me to give you is to ask that to Eric, because he's gonna know a lot more about the internal structure. But it's really new technology. So most of what we buy is wrecked. So it's still a usable vehicle, except for the fact that it smashed into another vehicle.
Gotcha.
So there's very little data on the longevity and lifespan of the battery. But like I said, all the batteries we have, we sell as used parts because they still have life to give.
Great. Great. Well, super. Are there any questions? Number 16. There we go.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say thank you for what you do, because I personally have benefited from what y'all do. I'm on my third Prius, and I've replaced the engine on 2 of them. Actually, now the third one is being replaced, and the oldest Prius just got the battery replaced, and it had 500,000 miles on it. So, answer your question, a long time.
Long time. Great.
So, but again, you're not just recycling and making it better, but you're also making it more affordable for people instead of having to buy a brand new battery.
That's the goal.
So
And,
thank you.
and like he said, they'll run.
Good. Good. Well, as you can see, the members of our committee are small business people, and they benefit from many of the presentations. Well, thank you. I don't think there are any more questions, and we have someone, Fredrickson, is going to speak with us about call to recycle. Mr. Corbett, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Any questions you have, please call on me.
Okay, we'll do. And if you can stick around for a minute or two after everything, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Appreciate you giving me the time to speak to the committee today. My name is Eric Fredrickson. I am the Managing Director of Operations for Call to Recycle. So first, a little bit about our organization. Call to Recycle was started in 1994. We were founded by the battery industry to help manage environmental responsibility for end of life for batteries. At the time, we specifically worked primarily in smaller consumer rechargeable batteries. We represent we work on behalf of over 300 battery producing companies to run consumer facing free collection programs. We have over 16,000 public facing free collection sites, every Home Depot, Lowe's, Best Buy, Office Depot, Staples. If you walk in, you see that recycling kiosk there on the side of the door. The batteries that go in there come into our call to recycle program. 85% of the US population lives within 10 miles of a free public facing collection site. We also support municipal household hazardous waste, or HHW, collection programs, and a variety of OEM end of life channels as well. So if you think of a tool manufacturer where they get all their tools back, they accumulate a lot of batteries, and we run recycling programs for them as well. We've been doing this for over 25 years. When we first started, nickel cadmium batteries and their environmental impact were the primary focus of the organization. Primary focus these days is obviously lithium-ion batteries. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've become increasingly involved in larger batteries like those that Derek and Pull Apart deal with, but as well as the OEMs that are putting the batteries onto the market. So Derek did a good job of talking about it, but real quick, I want to kind of go through what happens at end of life for a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle, so that you can understand what the differences are and the specific unique challenges and costs associated with the recycling a EV. So vehicles end up at end of life. They're at dealers, garages, auction houses, junkyards. They eventually make their way to auto recyclers in the auto recycling channel. There's generally going to be depollution that goes on. You need to drain fluids, oils, things out of the vehicle. Next step is going to be some component of dismantling. So harvesting the useful parts for extended life. The most sustainable thing you can do beyond reducing your consumption is to extend the life of things. Drive that Prius 500,000 miles. So all of these parts get harvested, sold back into the market. Batteries or vehicles are then crushed to size reduce them, make them smaller, loaded up. They go to one of over 200 auto shredders across the country. There's a very robust network of auto shredders all around the country to be able to very economically service organizations like Pull Apart and all of the other auto aggregators across the country. You then have separation. So you're getting the metals out, the ferrous and non-ferrous metals out of that shredded auto material. That material then goes on for further refining, typically smelting, refining, and it's eventually sold back into the metals market. Typically about 80% of the weight of a vehicle is sold back into the materials market. So when Derek is talking about the quantity of vehicles that come out of end of life, it is an almost completely closed loop process. There is a component of auto shredder residue or fluff that ends up being landfilled. There are technologies emerging to reduce the portion of that ASR fluff that has to go into a landfill. With traditional battery recycling, so a lead acid battery, for economic reasons, if you set a battery on the curb, a 12-volt lead acid battery, it will recycle itself. There's enough money in every component of recycling a lead acid battery that if you set it on the ground, someone will come and pick it up and it will get recycled. Over 98% of lead acid car batteries get recycled. It is the single most recycled commodity or article in the United States. There is value to do so. One of the big important considerations about traditional vehicle recycling that is fundamentally different from EV recycling is that by and large, traditional vehicle recycling is a self-funding activity. Whoever ends up with that vehicle at end of life generally can get a couple of $100 for that vehicle. Depends on the commodities market, what's going on in the world, but they're not left with a big economic burden right now. So I want to bring everybody up to speed really quickly on a couple of important things to just know about batteries. You start off with the cell. That's the individual smallest unit in a battery. If you know what the battery and the one that's up here, that's what's in a cell phone. So that's typically going to be one cell. There's typically about 3 or 4 cells in a laptop. Cells get assembled into modules. Modules get assembled into packs. Cells can either be flat pouch cells like the one on the screen, or they could be cylindrical cells that look similar to a D cell, C cell, AA, or AA, AAA battery. The larger you get with the battery, you cross a line from cells at individual levels, have a net positive value on the recycling market. You could take that cell and just immediately recycle it. The larger the battery gets, the more cost there is associated with the recycling activity for all of the reasons that Derek just spoke about. There's more transportation, there's more disassembly, there's more activity to move it around. Just to make sure everybody knows the differences of different types of EV batteries. And this is an important graphic because it really illustrates what Derek was talking about with the scale. In the top left, you have a hybrid electric vehicle. So these vehicles generally have regenerative braking. The power is supplemented to a smaller degree by the battery. You have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So you don't have enough regenerative energy created to charge the battery, but it still has an internal combustion engine. And then you have battery electric vehicles. And as you can see, so in the 2 on the screen here, bottom left is a 2021 Ford Mustang. One on the bottom right is a 2017 Chevy Bolt. So this pack is a sled that consists of the majority of the vehicle itself. So I think this does a good job of pointing out why it is that we're crossing from a smaller issue to what will eventually be a very large issue. A key consideration, and this is changing for a variety of reasons, but right now, the materials that are covered from EV battery recycling don't cover the cost of the recycling. So collection, dismantling, transportation. But even if you take one of these battery packs landed at a recycler, there is a charge to recycle that battery because it must be further dismantled before it can be introduced into the lithium-ion battery recycling process. Lithium-ion battery recycling process typically involves discharging. So oftentimes done in a salt bath, shredding. And then from there, it kind of splits. There are older paradigm pyrometallurgical processes. So you melt the metals down and take them all the way back down to the elemental level. You're typically looking to recover nickel and cobalt. The newer paradigm processes use hydrometallurgical, so chemical leaching. So you shred that material very fine. You put it into a aqueous solution, and you introduce certain chemicals to drop out all of the stuff that you're after. And really, the goal is to not take the cobalt and the nickel all the way down to the elemental level and have to send it to smelters and refiners all over the world. The goal is to keep that material in that battery closer to being a battery, to retain a lot of the value as you introduce it back into the value stream. So there's got to be an answer going on. And as a battery recycling nonprofit and in close conversation with members of the business community, there's a broad consensus that we know that something is going to need to be established from business to handle and manage EV batteries. There's a safety component, as Derek talked about, electrification. The fire risks associated with lithium-ion batteries are very real. From a sustainability impact, Just to give an idea, cobalt is, I just looked it up. Cobalt is currently trading at about $72,000 a ton. That's up from $54,000 a ton at the end of last year. So cobalt is the primary metal that gives energy density to lithium-ion batteries. Nickel is an important component as well. And then lithium, we don't talk about as much. There are more reserves of lithium, but we need to reduce the consumption of virgin material for lithium as well. There are obviously big economic reasons why we need to get these metals back into the metals market. Nickel is actually a key component in stainless steel. And so even if it doesn't go back into the battery market, there are always good homes for nickel and cobalt. There are also national security implications for recycling the components of lithium-ion batteries. There are very few reserves of the metals that go into lithium-ion batteries domestically. And we're increasingly reliant on international partners for feedstock, whereas the United States is a very large consumer of batteries and battery products. So we have a lot of that here as an alternate source of feedstock for US manufacturers. One of the things that gets different about electric vehicle end-of-life pathways to internal combustion engines is the diversity of directions the battery can go at end of life. As Derek said, when you have a battery that outlasts the vehicle, there's value in that battery for remanufacturing into primary life. It's still going to be a battery. We're either going to directly reuse it, or we're going to do some degree of refurbishing of the packs, of the modules within that pack to use it again. There's a lot of discussion of repurposing batteries into second life, which is typically going to be stationary storage. There are technical and economic challenges associated with repurposing that industry has yet to really address fully. One of the biggest concerns and issues, drivers, is you start to compete with newer batteries. And as the cost of battery materials comes down, there's less economic drivers and reasons to repurpose a battery. One of the important things to consider is that all of those just delay the fact that eventually this battery is going to need to be recycled. So we can repurpose it, we can reuse it, we can extend the primary life. At some point, we're still going to need to recycle that battery. This graphic is now out of date with the introduction or the announcement of a lithium-ion battery recycling plant just east of Atlanta in Covington by Battery Resourcers. So it looks like there's some good coverage on here. There's a big gap in the Southeast. Not everyone who is on here is a direct battery recycler. But think of this and compared to over 200 auto shredders across the country, and you start to understand how much you drive up the transportation costs associated with an end-of-life battery. When you think about batteries, one of the things that's different at end of life than vehicles is that it's not just a one-way flow of the material, the vehicle moving towards end of life and eventually crossing the circle back into new product. We believe that there's going to be a need for information and funds to be moved in a variety of different directions as this battery gets managed. Some of the key unanswered questions about EV and battery recycling, and this relates to the parallel movement of goods, information, and funds through the end of the life value stream. Who's going to remove the batteries? Who determines where the battery goes? What information is needed, required regarding the battery? And then ultimately, who pays for the recycling and the associated transportation? As we look to the future, right now, there are really not robust regulatory frameworks associated with end-of-life responsibility for batteries, but that doesn't mean that they're not being collected and recycled, and that industry is not looking to solve these issues. Collection, aggregation, transportation networks do not currently exist for end-of-life EV battery recycling. This is primarily because there are really not that many EV batteries coming off the market yet, and the ones that are still have life in them. The short answer is we would typically expect an EV battery to last about 10 years. That really depends on your tolerance for driving a vehicle that won't go as far anymore, though. If my vehicle had a 600-mile range and now it has a 220-mile range, I might decide it's time for a new vehicle, but there's still value in that vehicle. And as we look to the future also, I think it's important to note that OEMs understand that they will be expected to play a role in end-of-life battery management. There's no notion that OEMs are looking to avoid responsibility associated with doing something with these batteries. It's just that the systems have not yet been built. OEMs would certainly prefer to coordinate the processes that are being put into place. And then also, I think it's important to note that there's been a lot of discussion about what happens to the orphaned batteries. And it is likely that eventually at some point, there will need to be some type of backstop programs for batteries that don't have a home. Because as I said, right now, you get that vehicle at end of life, you can get a couple $100 from a dealer for it. Current paradigm, an EV at full end of life has a cost to the member of society who holds that vehicle. And so we do feel that there is going to need to be a mechanics in place to deal with those vehicles for which there is no responsible party. There are no mechanics in place to recycle that battery in the associated vehicle. So that's what I've got. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Great. Thank you for your presentation. Eric, it was extremely interesting. And you brought a lot of information to our committee that we normally don't think about. Information, we're hearing the revolution from, Tesla and Vivian and all these things about what's going on in the future. But apparently the recycling of the primary source of power hasn't developed enough yet into a ecosystem, or rather economic system rather, that would take care of itself. I've got one question, and then I'd like to open it up for members of the committee if we have a few minutes. Is you explained to me or to the committee that, our tolerance for less miles on a charge.
That's right.
Is that how the end of life and the end of use of electric vehicles are going to be? In other words, the vehicle will still be operational, but the battery will maintain a smaller charge or a lesser charge, and she'll have to do it.
That's right. It's not like an internal combustion engine that throws a rod that needs to be reborn. It's a light switch. So if you think of your phone gets a couple of years old, doesn't hold a charge nearly as long as it used to. It's just like that with a battery that's in a vehicle. So are you going to hold out for another 6 months, another year, another 2 years? Are you going to have range anxiety with your phone? And at some point you lose a tolerance to do that. So you either need to replace the battery or just get a new vehicle.
Gotcha. Now, one question that comes to mind is, we're looking at advancing the charging stations in the state of Georgia.
Yep.
And would the cost of a charge for an older vehicle be the same as the cost of a charge for a newer vehicle, so that the miles per charge would be reduced? Is that what you're?
Yeah. So I think a way to think of it is, over time, if your gas tank got smaller.
Okay.
So you would need less gas to put in that gas tank. So your battery has less energy in it, less capability to hold energy. So it doesn't require as much energy going into it in order to get to 100% state of charge.
Okay. That explains it. So in other words, if you paid $10, let's say, for a charge for a brand new vehicle, and you got 500 or 600 miles, 5 years down the road, you could only get 400 miles. That charge would be $6. It wouldn't, the electricity.
The electricity consumption would be less. The economic model associated with charging may not necessarily be one-to-one for how much energy you put into the battery and how much you pay. So there might be a stop fee or just a flat fee associated with it. But if you're charging at your house, then what you just said will exactly be the case.
Gotcha. Okay, well, number 25, we have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this very interesting presentation. You mentioned that there are still needs to develop a good regulatory framework for recycling. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit, if it's not too complicated, who would be in charge or is in charge of the regulatory framework? Is it, what do you know from EPA or EPD? So, because especially when we talk about small businesses, usually regulatory things is something we want to minimize. So
That's right. Well, I think it's important for a small business committee to consider too, that when you talk about a regulatory system, oftentimes that regulatory system can help facilitate and ease the costs associated with doing business. So the example that I will give of that is most batteries in the United States are managed as what's called universal waste. Universal waste is a subclassification of a hazardous waste with far fewer burdens on the business. These wastes are universal: fluorescent light bulbs, batteries, a number of other types of things, paints and aerosols. That so the regulatory framework does not just necessarily mean increasing the burden. Good regulatory frameworks can also help facilitate business activities. The universal waste language that we are dealing with in the United States is from the mid-90s, before there were even really lithium-ion batteries, and certainly before there were EVs. So from a federal standpoint, I think there is an opportunity for clarification on classification and determination. The first obligation of a waste generator or someone who's introducing a hazardous material for transport is classification, determination. What is it? What am I doing? So I think there could be regulatory pathways to ease some of those issues. I think that from a permitting standpoint, ensuring that we're facilitating things like recyclers, charging infrastructure would be an important consideration. One of the things that industry wants, as I said in this, is the opportunity to be able to demonstrate that they can take responsibility for this themselves. Call to Recycle, the organization I work for in the program that we run, we are in the state of Georgia a voluntary program. There is no regulatory obligation for any of our stewards to fund our program, but they do so because they understand the importance of keeping these batteries and these materials out of the landfill. So I don't think I think it's important to say that it's not just about a regulatory framework. There's a ecosystem, a business ecosystem framework that needs to be developed as well. So in general, what's going to happen with the batteries in places where there's an abdication of responsibility, then we typically see regulations follow. But I point to the voluntary Call to Recycle program as an example that quite frequently industry steps forward and manages and takes care of an issue because they're motivated by things other than just regulations.
I have another question, number 26.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Frederickson, for being with us, and your presentation has been very interesting.
Thank you.
Did I hear correctly that you are a nonprofit?
That is correct. We are a 501c4 nonprofit. We generate our revenue primarily through licensing fees. So if you purchase a rechargeable battery, it's generally going to have a seal on it that has a phone number on it where you can find one of our battery recycling locations. That is how OEMs fund our program primarily. We do have a for-profit subsidiary, and we do have some revenue generating activity that's ancillary to the battery and battery safety business that we partake in. But yes, Call to Recycle is a nonprofit.
Thank you. I just find it, so you see your role and your mission as a nonprofit in more of protection of the environment, protecting the landfills, minimizing the need for landfill, et cetera. It's always interesting to me to see, based in also the sort of follow up with the regulatory question. It's always interesting to see for the free market to work, and if there is a profit motive for companies to recycle and to get into this business, it's always an interesting balance, I think.
Well, I think important to consider too, along to your point, that in places where something cannot be a fully economic self-sustaining activity, because frankly, if what Call to Recycle did could be done for a profit, we would not need to be a nonprofit. But we are a nonprofit that was started by industry, that is funded by industry, and we are a mission-based organization. And it is not just keeping batteries out of landfill, but it is also we also play a role in increasing the public dialogue around batteries and battery recycling, and for providing the public with a conduit through which they can recycle batteries.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a very interesting point that if you sit a battery by the side of the road, it will get recycled.
A lead
most of the
acid
time.
battery.
Yeah.
Yep, not all batteries.
Not all, but that
Yeah.
was interesting to me that if it's just left sitting there, probably if there's an incentive, a financial incentive, somebody will pick it up and go recycle it. But thank you very much for being with us again. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I didn't ask for the.
Okay, good. All right. Well, Mr. Frederickson, Corbett, and Mr. McCarthy's already left. I want to thank y'all. Very, very, and Chip, thank you as well. Very, very interesting presentation. It kind of gives us insight on what we need to be doing in this area. And we have the history of the internal combustion engine to look at and then kind of predict our future. Again, thank you very, very much for being here today and sharing this knowledge with the committee members. Thank you for participating. Without any further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you.